Hey everybody, Norm here again, back with you talking about LabVIEW 2025 Q3 features. This time we're going to talk about a feature that is just as simple as a default behavior changing in source distributions. But once again, as I dug into the notes of what R&D has in there, I realized there's a little bit more to it and there's a better conversation to have around leveraging this feature and also just kind of general awareness about something in LabVIEW that you might not even know about and a little bit of the reason why we changed a default behavior. So let's go ahead and dive into it and see what it looks like. All right, so what I have here is a very simple VI. It's actually, I think, maybe an example VI that talks about putting data into and out of a database. But if I go into the properties for this, and for reference, I always love to press Control I, takes me right here. And there's a lot of things underneath this dialog that, of course, we can scan through and look. But in particular, the one that I want to highlight right here is this feature right there, separate compiled code from source file. Now, this is a feature that we introduced a number of years ago, and we went away from something that we refer to internally as a unifile. LabVIEW VIs always used to be composed of 4 major constructs. Actually, funny enough, if you actually look at the VI server logos right here, you can actually see that right there. That is the declaration of what a VI looks like, the 4 different parts. There's the code, the front panel, the block diagram, and then the compiled code of a VI. Now, many of us that have been using LabVIEW for a long time probably understand that LabVIEW is not an interpreted language. It is actually compiling down to binary, machine code, on and on and on. And we used to include that as part of the VI itself. And we changed that maybe circa 2013 or 2011, where we no longer include it, and it's for a very specific reason. That little square, maybe it's the one that's dark, I don't know which one we want to refer to it as, but it caused a lot of problems with source code control, because seemingly minor changes to the code that didn't cause a change in the compiled code, no change in the functionality or anything else about it, would cause a need to show a difference in source code control that might cause very specific challenges. This could be something that was maybe a type definition changed upstream or external to the individual code. So by removing that compiled or one of those 4 quadrants from what a VI is, now we've basically reduced the amount of noise and the number of VIs that you need to check in or have marked as changed just because some other part of your overall system had been updated. It was a great and appropriate change that a lot of us that build larger VIs and architectures that mattered a lot to. And so we enabled this ability to separate the compiled code from what gets saved to disk. Now, what ended up happening along with this is that if you had let's get into the project here, and we're going to dive into something that I love and use heavily, and not enough people do, is the source distribution. So when you're looking to share a piece of code with someone else, you should be using a source distribution. We'll get into the reason for that in a second, but let's show the feature really quick. So if I get into my source distribution, I'm just gonna go ahead and double click on that. I think you can, there you go. So there are my properties associated with it. And if you look underneath, I think it's underneath the additional exclusion section, and you can see it right here. And this is the default behavior that changed. It used to be that we would always embed the compiled code in all source files when you were sending it to, or when you were making the source distribution in general. Now, I looked in the notes and there was kind of some legacy reasons why we were doing it that way. It was kind of a behavior that we wanted to maintain the continuity of it. Hey, if you did a source distribution before, we didn't have that feature, the compiled code would always come along with it. It would basically reduce the amount of time necessary to compile the VI when it went onto a new system and couple other changes. But we've realized over time that importance of the default behavior in LabVIEW is to always exclude the source code unless explicitly declared in a VI. And so what we decided to change is to follow that same ethos of separating the compiled code from the VI, and now we have it be using the compiled code as you've instructed it. It turns out, like in the notes, they were talking a little bit, hey, we thought maybe this was an alternative to just always have a source distribution declare whether it should be included or excluded. But we backed up onto the bigger idea of, hey, if you have set those settings deliberately to include or exclude, and maybe the default is always to exclude the source or the compiled code, let's just go ahead and adhere to what you have saved in each individual source file. Now, there's ways of setting all of those properties en masse, right? There's ways with VI server and scripting that you can go ahead and do that. But that's really the differentiation that we have in terms of what did we change with regards to source distributions. Now, when it comes down to going to, let's get back over here. When it comes down to like other things that impact the LabVIEW developer, if you are an RT developer, that is something that the RT VIs will always have that source code along with it, because that's part of the deployment process. You're going to compile the code, it's that unifile again, and then we push it down to the RT targets for execution and all the other things that might happen in an RT deployment. So that's like I said, that's basically the gist of the feature. Now, in terms of source distributions, if you're still with me here, hang on for a moment, because not a lot of people use source distributions that I've encountered, but most people run into this one singular problem. Let's get back to the code here. If I have a piece of code, let's just call this 6 types insert, and it relies on other sub VIs, how do I share, or type definitions or globals or everything else? How would I share this VI, or how would you share this VI with a coworker? Let's pause for a minute, maybe put your comments in the video comments below. But the reality is something that I've seen very frequently is I will share a VI or a folder of VIs or my what I think is a complete collection. And normally what ends up happening is I forget something. And then it's this back and forth collaboration of you forgot this dependency, you forgot this dependency, you forgot this dependency. And that's really frustrating. And I have learned, I think maybe it was about 8 years ago, to just rely heavily. If I'm going to share a piece of code with you, the very first thing I should do is go to creating a brand new source distribution. And here's the very specific reason why. If I go down to building a source distribution, and I'm going to go ahead and pick one of the files, there's the 6 types insert, and let's just go ahead and do the thermal cam debugging. Well, we'll do both of them. One of the things that I will normally do to make sure that my source distribution works okay is I will go to preview first. And the preview will generate a hierarchy. Basically, I think by default, it makes it flat of all of the code that it knows that the thing that I want to share with you, what's needed to go ahead and you open it successfully without any problems. And here's a great example as, because of one of the behaviors, actually, I think I needed to change this option right here. I needed to enable preserving the disk hierarchy. But because by default, I think it's false. But once you do that and you see the preview, you can very quickly find like, oh, wait a minute. I actually don't want this file to be in some other location. However, it is dependent. Let's go ahead and collapse some of these here, right? You can see I've got my thermal cam debugging. And so whenever you have a file, like a rogue file that you didn't realize your code was dependent on, doing this source distribution will bring it to the forefront. Now, once again, this is a feature video, but I never get a chance to talk to anybody about source distribution, so you're getting it, so hang on. So the reason and the ways to make this better, the thing that's particularly interesting and why source distributions are so powerful, not only to call out and make it visible to you once you make the preserved disk hierarchy true, that you have files in random locations because it kind of finds the least common denominator directory and on and on and on. As you can see, probably C:/ is that for me. You can also fix it. You can also rearrange it still from within this dialog. And so if I go to it looks like the 6 types insert is the one that's causing me current problems. And so what I can do is I can create a brand new directory. I can give it a name. This is my other thing that matters. It could be somebody else's source code repository that you installed or something like that. Still marking preserved disk hierarchy. And then underneath the source file settings that you'll see here, I can go to that one, where's the 6 paths? I think it was there you go. I can declare that singular VI and all of its components go underneath the other thing that matters directory that I just created a moment ago. Now that I've done that, let's go back to preview. And you'll find out really quick that entire hierarchy, instead of being like one massive branch and another long branch, is going to now be collapsed and rearranged without any effort from your part of like moving files and making sure that things get linked properly, all from within the source distribution construct. So we'll wait for this to happen in just a moment. There we go. So now you can see I have a single directory that of course has CTI and color maps, which are of course part of the original directory, but now I have this other directory that now all collapses up and we don't end up with this massive expansion. All right, so let's bring that to a close. And so what did we talk about? It was the default behavior. I was talking about the compiled code, and then kind of that default behavior when you're doing that source distribution that we now will not default include. We will just do whatever you have declared explicitly or implicitly on a chunk of code. And then hopefully you also learned a little bit more about that value of the source distribution. So when you share code with somebody else, are you just commonly zipping up your entire directory and here's your zip file and you send it along with a hope and a prayer that maybe everything came along for the ride? Or do you use the source distributions like I do to very good effect on the other side? Let us know, leave some comments in there. Let us know if these featurette videos are helping you, and I'll see you in the next videos. Thanks.